Do you remember when those pesky Xbox Ones were confirmed to be still having games made for them for 1, maybe 2 years, quote unquote? This was said to hold Xbox Series X back. You know, games are made for the old thing, so the new thing can't, be good. Of course you do. There was countless article after countless article written on this thing, as well as an army of those who really don't understand how scaling and machine language works. But some people out there did understand what could actually be held back through cross-generational support. But where are they now in the midst of PS5's Gen 4 SSD? Remember, this thing is supposed to cause a shift in game development, the way things are made, the way things could be optimized in the pipeline, and potentially even enhance performance. As I explained with Series X, there could be something held back, and that's gameplay design, the very thing this SSD could change. You know, how worlds are shaped, how they're crafted. Fundamental changes to the way things work that are just too demanding for older hardware. Not graphics, not graphics effects like ray tracing, not pixels, not textures, not lighting. None of this stuff would be held back because that all scales on the x86 driven hardware. This has been being done for decades on PC, quite effectively I might add. But those same people talking about how Xbox Series X will be held back are not talking about why PlayStation 5's SSD actually will not really matter in the grand scheme of things. It will load things fantastically. It's going to be a phenomenal piece of hardware inside of that system that I've also only said great things about. But the question remains, why aren't these same people talking about how this SSD is going to be held back by everything else like the Series X was? Remember, the only thing they're bragging about with this thing is the fundamental shift in gaming, the way games are made, the way worlds are built. No more bottlenecks. You can just throw all that information at the player and not worry about how much data hits them at once. But the same exact people saying this said the Series X will be held back on pretty much what is 99-100% GPU CPU scaling. I think people need to understand that the thing about PS5's SSD, the thing that is so incredible, the thing that separates it from the pack, is that it is with raw throughput faster than pretty much anything out today on PC. Though Xbox does have a compression method to get it up to almost 5 gigabytes per second, it is still not as quick. And Sony have a compression method of their own to nearly double that SSD speed up to 8 and 9 gigabytes. They have that kind of bandwidth, and that's really awesome and amazing and great for people that hate load screens. But when it comes down to it, the only thing the tech experts are talking about is how this thing could change everything. And if you're wondering what I'm getting at, well, how is it that it changes everything when the only thing that it changes is fundamental game design, the way games are made? You know, those games that run on hundreds of millions of other pieces of hardware that have nothing even close to the bandwidth of this SSD, or even a top-end or even a medium class NVMe on PC today. How is it that nobody's talking about that? I'll say it again, if the game is made from the ground up and pretty much nothing else for an SSD, you can pretty much essentially change the pipeline of how games are developed. Everything that's coming in and going out as quick as it could possibly go, it completely changed how things work in gaming, right? It can completely change everything about how things are made. But when it comes down to it, that same game is going to be running on someone's 54 or 7200 RPM mechanical drive in their PC. When it comes down to it, you've got 98%, 99% of the entire world who are not even close to that bandwidth. So are developers going to make that game? Do you think developers are going to make that game to leverage 5 to 7 gigabytes per second? Probably not. And let's be honest, Xbox Series X with its velocity architecture, developers are already talking about you can do all of the same streaming stuff that all the third parties and everybody's already doing. Bigger, better worlds. It all comes inherently through all the technology that's coming. It's really almost like the PS5's SSD is just overkill, like they overinvested. I would rather have the GPU and the CPU and the RAM that can scale, like I said, through x86 and give me all of those extra effects that are brought down through PC. Instead, I've got an SSD that is amazing. It's fast. It'll cut 9-second load times down to a few seconds, hopefully. But at the end of the day, is it going to change gaming? Think about it. I know some of you are really triggered by this title. I don't know what it is yet, but I know it's going to be good. Are developers and big publishers and their executives going to abandon the rest of the world, the industry, for this kind of bandwidth on some storage? No, they're not. Remember, this is gameplay design from the ground up different. How the worlds are built, crafted, how they're presented, all the different things they can display at the same time, all this stuff, right? Listen, everything they're saying is true. It really would be a shift. Things really could be different. But at the same time, everything would have to be made for this drive. That's what I've always talked about. Fundamental game design from the ground up, the way the game is shaped, the way it's built. It can't exist on 99.9% of storage devices out there. And I can't imagine a time anytime soon where the world has caught up and everyone has 5+ gigabytes per second of storage bandwidth. I mean, we still live in a time where this game right here, as well as almost any other, still runs just fine on a 120 megabytes, 160 megabyte per second, 7200 RPM drive. This game is actually running on my Xbox One X through an external SSD, and even that SSD's bandwidth is cut in half because it is a 3.1 drive stuck on a 3.0 port. How long do you think it would be until developers and publishers are spending millions of dollars making big games just for a drive like this? Is there really that big of a demand for this kind of bandwidth over something like more GPU CPU power? Remember, Sony put a lot of money into this SSD over more power. Are developers going to say, hey, you know what, this Assassin's Creed only works on PCI 4 SSDs? No, they're not. You're talking 40 times faster than the previous generation in the Xbox Series X and even more in PS5. How much can a developer really leverage when they are targeting anything else other than that PS5 NVMe? Remember, this is the reinvention of development and what's possible. That phenomenal shift in gameplay design is going to be held back, not that extra ambient occlusion. The complete redesign of a game world and how it's created is going to be held back, not that extra 2 million pixels. Put simply, one scales, one does not. If I want tessellation, I can turn it on. I can deactivate it. It's software driven. If I'm using this SSD and I'm leveraging it to its fullest, I'm doing things that were never possible before from the bottom up to change the entire industry and the way games are made. Hardware. I need one of these in every box, or at least most of them. I need it to be that compatible. You will have to code for the hardware that can leverage this, and there just isn't really any. Meanwhile, the screen space reflections in game X, Y, or Z that are too demanding for something like maybe a GTX 960 or even newer is, well, we just turn it off. It still works, still runs. Imagine a big AAA game like, let's say, Doom Eternal here. Let's say Bethesda decide, hey, we got so much bandwidth with this PCI 4 drive, we can go ahead and just get rid of this piece, we can open it up here, we can do all this. We don't need all these little interconnecting areas because we don't need time for these things to load into the RAM, etc. Okay, but are they making one completely different version of a game just for PS5, or are they going to go with everyone else? This includes PC, Xbox, every single other thing. Of course, they're going to go with the most common denominator. Now, that doesn't mean they'll make it run best on the most common denominator. We all know that's not true. We looked at the Xbox One X versus something like PS4 Pro. I'm saying that they will make sure that it runs on things with really slow hard drives. Things like Xbox Series X and PS5 are so far above that line that it's not even close to being close to bottleneck there. You're looking at the common denominator being on PC, especially after they phase out some of these older systems. Microsoft planned to support the older stuff with their first party for a year or two. Meanwhile, Sony say they are supporting PS4 for a little while as well. In what way and with what software, we will see, but at the end of the day, it all remains the same. You have a lot of different hardware combinations on the PC to consider here. Not to mention, most games are actually developed on a PC, and you can rest assured that they will still support, at the very least, and this is really not even realistic, SATA-driven SSDs. That's a crazy high low ball, if you get what I'm saying. But honestly, if you really want to be realistic about it, they will support hard drives that are slower than SATA-driven SSDs, and even if they didn't, which is still, again, crazy, that SSD is not even close to in the same realm as an NVMe SSD, let alone PS5's one-of-a-kind, can't even buy on the shelves right now, 5.5 gigs per second PCI Gen 4 SSD. As I've always said, gameplay design, the way you design things, the world, all of this stuff is held back, not graphics. That's why Series X will leverage its hefty performance advantage over the PS5, because these things scale, and that's why PS5's ultimate crazy bandwidth, which is, again, a real awesome thing, will never truly change anything, because it will only ever really truly, in the grand scheme of things, be relegated to shorter load times. Though I do expect it to be leveraged by at least a few games, and that's great, but when it comes down to it, it's not changing anything. And you could argue, yeah, PlayStation exclusives, they could do some really crazy things, and I would 100% agree with you, if not for the current trend of their games starting to hit PC. So now you got Sony starting to send games like Death Stranding, Horizon Zero Dawn. They published several games on PC already. More are coming. What are they gonna do? Are they going to build a game for an SSD that's only on PS5 and, you know, far less than 1% of the PC population? Probably not. Or are they going to build two entirely different versions of a game? That's a legitimate question. But hey, let me know your thoughts down below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. I figured I'd throw this out here for you guys. I felt like talking about it, seeing as I've been having so many discussions about it on Twitter. I do not think this SSD would really do much for performance of a game. Just so you know, though they generally don't increase your FPS unless your hard drive is actually the bottleneck, meaning it is too slow to send the information where it needs to go and the GPU just can't pump frames out fast like it wants to. You should not see benefits like you would if you, say, upgraded your graphics card, unless the game is entirely from the ground up built and designed to take advantage and leverage over 5 gigabytes per second on that SSD. That could completely change the pipeline and the way the game is made. Otherwise, it's made for every other hard drive in every other device. But hey, maybe they'll come up with some kind of crazy API or something that scales performance somehow and does actually add a few frames. When it comes down to it, it's just not even close. They're close to enough to close the delta between the new systems. And it's okay. One should be $100 more. At least that's what I'm counting on. So let me know what you're counting on down below, aside from some angry children in the comments and those who didn't even watch the video. If you see anybody lying about what was said on this video, feel free to correct them. They do that quite often. Again, hit that like button if you enjoyed it, share it out, and subscribe for more. Check out the link down below if you want to support content on this channel. Of course, my breakdown of PS5 versus Series X specs is on the channel. Check it out. And of course, I'll link the actual video where Digital Foundry do talk about the SSD and how it's a shift and how it can do this and that and this and that, but really don't acknowledge the same thing they said with Series X, which is gameplay design would be held back. Anyway, no offense to those guys, just something I noticed. But anyway, I'm Dealer. I'm out.